Good day! If you're finding videos to help you improve your proving skills by using rules of inference, please continue to watch this video. Alright, so to start our video, we have here arguments involving sustainable development goals using rules of inference. Alright, so our first argument, we have the SDG number 1, which is no poverty. So our argument is, both the implementation of poverty alleviation programs and economic growth are happening, which implies a direct effort to address poverty. If either the government acts through programs or international aid is provided, then poverty is expected to not be widespread. Either poverty remains widespread or it is significantly reduced. Thus, the poverty is significantly reduced. So now let's find or derive our variables. So our first variable is a P, which is the government poverty alleviation programs, and Q for the economic growth. As for the international aid, R for poverty is widespread and T for poverty is reduced. After that, let's derive or drag down our hypothesis from the arguments. So our hypothesis number 1, both the implementation of poverty alleviation programs and economic growth are happening, which implies a direct effort to address poverty. Hypothesis number 2 is if either the government acts through programs or international aid is provided, then poverty is expected to not be widespread. Hypothesis 3 is either poverty remains widespread or it is significantly reduced. And now our conclusion, thus the poverty is significantly reduced. Now let's express the hypothesis to symbols. Our given one is P conjunction Q and then 2 P disjunction S implies negation R. And then for number 3, we have R disjunction T. So what we need to prove is T, which is the variable T, which is poverty is significantly reduced. So our solution to that, alright, so our the variable we need to prove is T. So first, the given, and then the next step is simplification of number 1, and we'll derive P. So number 5 will derive P disjunction S using addition in number 4. And then for 6, negation R, which what we used is modus ponens 2 and 5. So for number 7, we use disjunctive syllogism for 3 and 6 to derive T. And that's how we derive or we prove the T from the argument. Alright. So our next SDG, we have the SDG 4, which is about quality education. So our statement is, if the country does not provide universal access to education or the country is lack of well-trained teachers, then the country must allocate sufficient funds for education. If the country allocates sufficient funds for education, then the country must have either adequate educational resources or effective learning environment. The country does not have adequate educational resources and does not provide reliable internet access. If the country does not provide reliable internet access, then the country does not have an effective learning environment. Therefore, the country must ensure universal access to education and equip enough well-trained teachers. So to derive our variables, we have here P for provide universal access to education, Q for enough well-trained teachers, R for allocate sufficient funds for education, S for adequate educational resources, U for provide reliable internet access, and T for effective learning environment. So we have 6 variables. And then derive or drag down our hypothesis. We have, if the country does not provide universal access to educational or the country is lack of well-trained teachers, then the country must allocate sufficient funds for education. And then the symbol for that is negation P conjunction Q implies R. And for hypothesis number 2, if the country allocates sufficient funds for education, then the country must have either adequate educational resources or effective learning environment. So the hypothesis states if-then statement, so we use the implication. R implies S disjunction T. So hypothesis number 3, the country does not have adequate educational resources and does not provide reliable internet access. So the symbol for that is negation S, conjunction negation U. So for hypothesis 4, if the country does not provide reliable internet access, then the country does not have an effective learning environment. So it also uses the if-then statement, then that's why we use the implication. Negation U implies negation T. So what we need to prove is the conclusion, which is therefore the country must ensure universal access to education and equip enough well-trained teachers. So the symbol for that is a P disjunction negation of Q.
So again, what we need to prove is P disjunction of negation Q. And then we have the given now. Then for the next step, we derive the negation of U using simplification of number 3. And then for the sixth step, negation of S, again we use simplification of number 3. For step 7, negation of T, and we use the modus ponens of 4 and 5. And for the step 8, negation of S, conjunction of negation T, we use conjunctions 6 and 7. For step 9, negation of quantity S disjunction of T, we use De Morgan rule of number 8. And for the step 10, negation of R, we use to prove it by modus tollens 2 and 9. For the 11th step, negation of quantity, negation of P, this conjunction Q, and we use modus tollens 1 and 10. And for the last step, P disjunction of negation Q, we use again the De Morgan's rule of 11. Okay, let's proceed to the last SDG, which is SDG 5. It's about gender equality. Here is the argument. If gender is essential for creating an equitable society and productive society, then gender equality is for everyone. For some instance, gender equality is not for everyone. Gender equality is necessary for a productive society. Thus, gender equality is not essential for creating equitable society. For this argument, let's drag down the variables. And the variables are C for gender equality is essential for creating an equitable society. P for gender equality is necessarily for productive society. And E for gender equality is for everyone. Now let's drag down the hypothesis from the argument. For the hypothesis 1, if gender equality is essential for creating an equitable society and productive society, then gender equality is for everyone. Here is the symbol. And for the hypothesis 2, for some instant, gender equality is not for everyone. And this is the symbol for number 2. And for hypothesis number 3, gender equality is necessary for productive society. And the symbol for that is here. And for our conclusion, thus gender equality is not essential for creating equitable society. And that is what we need to prove in this argument. So let's proceed to the solution. Again, what we need to prove is negation of C. And here are the givens. For the step 4, we have negation of quantity C conjunction of P. We use modus tollens to prove it, of 1 and 2. And for the step 5, negation of C disjunction of negation P. We use De Morgan's rule of number 4. And for the step 6, we use double negation of P of number 3. Step 7, we have negation of C. We use disjunctive syllogism of 5 and 6. That's how we prove arguments involving SDGs using law of inference. Hope you learned something from our video.
Please like and share.